Okay, I have a lot in these slides. I got kind of carried away. I'm going to get through them in about 5 minutes. Then I have about 7 minutes of audio, and then I'm going to try to finish up with some thoughts or take some questions or something. I'm actually working on a book. A potential title for it is Complicating and Implicating Language, talking about dyslexia from kind of a decoloniality standpoint. So this is like my third or fourth class where we've covered decoloniality. I'm in my senior year, kind of taking this backwards. So I really enjoyed this piece. I read Romeo Garcia, over a year ago and visited with him. So I was excited to do this piece. But as we talk about decoloniality, these are quotes from Romeo's piece towards the end, some kind of cautionaries about how we talk about decoloniality. But this is my definition right here on the first bullet. It's a dismantling of knowledges which discursively racialize, minoritize, or otherwise marginalize the other. And I've been really interested in decoloniality, and I didn't always understand why. It was like, this is my people, I identify with this, I really like this, I'm not indigenous or non-white in any way. But I found this quote from Leela Watson, an Aboriginal activist in Australia. She says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." I think that's why I really identify with decoloniality, because I feel like my liberation is really bound up with theirs. And I find the methods of decoloniality very empowering. So I am dyslexic. I hesitantly identified that way for a while until I read Granger and Cosenza, where I was like, holy cow, I am dyslexic. They are dyslexic scholars writing from a dyslexic viewpoint. And I wrote this piece called Well Read. This is part of it right here, kind of talking about how my childhood in some parts of that piece and how maybe I would have been diagnosed with dyslexia if I hadn't been homeschooled, or maybe I would have just felt stupid. When we talk about decoloniality, it's the colonial traffics and the normative. Again, this is a piece from Romeo's, or a quote from Romeo's piece. The colonial just creates this normative of, this is normal, this is other, this is less than, this is anthropos versus humantas, right? So decoloniality is about delegitimizing that myth, kind of troubling that idea of what's normative. So I have some juxtaposition on this page right here. Again, a lot of this, like the title here, A Space from Which to Cultivate Another Way of Thinking. These are quotes from Romeo's piece. And then I'm sharing right here Cosenza and Granger, some of their quotes, which they're not writing through a decoloniality lens, but I am. I'm actually using their quotes in my book, and I really identify with a lot of them, so I'm sharing them here for you. When we talk about decoloniality, we talk about this spirit of pluriversality. This is in juxtaposition to universality. So the colonial mind has this idea that there are universal truths that we can uncover and apply them universally to all people, where this spirit of pluriversality is, kind of embraces this idea of humanity and difference. Lu-Ming Mao has a phrase called togetherness and difference, which I really love. And so again, I'm juxtaposing some of Garcia and Baca here on the left with Granger on the right. And this is some writing from Granger, which again is really why I feel like I'm so interested in decoloniality. She's writing about her dyslexia and this question, what do you think? Which is a simple question that teachers ask kids all the time. She says, it's so overwhelming that I become anxious and want to talk much longer than the person asking is prepared to hear. There is no single answer that could possibly sum up what do you think, because I can't think about things right now. I have a hurricane on my hands. But this mundane question is not asking for a tour, so there's no point in answering the question. So this presentation is actually an example of that. It's kind of like this hurricane. It's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not getting through it all. But that's what you get when you ask someone like me, what do you think? I put up these memes here of Entish, I kind of feel like that sometimes. Like, I don't speak a lot, but when I do speak, and we'll get to another part here from Granger in a second that kind of speaks to this, but I feel like I have so much to say about a subject. Yeah, it says, "You must understand, young hobbit, it takes a long time to say anything in Old Entish, and we never say anything unless it's worth talking a long time to say it." Then he says, responding to the hobbit, "That doesn't make sense to me, but then again, you are very small." So I have quotes here on the bottom again from Garcia's piece. And we're about 5 minutes in. So I wanted to share this quote from Granger. I have a link to her writing right here that really, again, I feel like it's not intentionally through a decolonial lens, but for me, this is where I come at this from. This is why I embrace it so much. But she says, "Normalizing philosophies of education have promoted the idea that clear, efficient communication is an ideal. Similarly, many have argued that concretely naming your situation or your situation is a form of resistance that is empowering. This typically requires one's morphological ability to speak clearly or one's ability to critically understand one's local global situation well enough to develop a vocabulary. What is forgotten is the potential for tears to articulately speak for themselves or the potential of being overwhelmed into silence by the possibilities." So when I first read this piece, I was in tears. I was like, holy cow, this is somebody who I can actually identify with. And I was introduced to Granger by Julie Cosenza. Reading Garcia's piece here really reminded me of this. I actually just recently listened to this.
Why are misspelled words so funny? Hours of entertainment for my table group. The word cream cheese, yes, I thought cream cheese was one word, with cheese spelled C-H-E-A-S-E. Cream chase? Chase? Julie, you want some cream chase on your bagel? Julie, why don't you put some cream chase in your lunch today? Good old Roger Dalton was always leaning over and reading my paper and pronouncing my misspelled words for the amusement of the other people at my table group. And do you know who was sitting at my table group? Elaine Marie Bergeron, the coolest kid in school and my best friend. She was the first person I had a crush on. And she, despite our sexcapades, our after-school playdates, our note passing, she laughed right along with Roger's jokes. And her laughter seemed a little louder than my other classmates. I spelled put, P-O-O-T. Sixth graders should know how to spell three-letter words. Poot? Put your hands together for Julie. Mom, Julie, did your mom put cream cheese in your lunch? Retard. You're retarded. Maybe she will forget. Maybe today I can listen to Mr. Phillips read the after-school story. Oh God, I hope I don't have to go. I really want to stay. I'm tired. I have a headache. My stomach hurts. I can't possibly go. I can learn. I can try harder. I can listen more. I can listen harder. I'll pay attention, please. I don't want to go. I just want to disappear. Poof. The phone rings, rudely interrupting story time. No. Mr. Phillips, don't answer it. Just because it rings doesn't mean you need to answer it. Don't answer the phone, they'll call back. For the love of God, don't answer the fuck. Julie, you need to go to the resource room. Like clockwork, John Coons leans over and says, retard, you're retarded. Now, I don't know if Mrs. Waters had garlic for breakfast every morning, or she was on some kind of medication, or it was heredity. But her breath smelled like death. And this wasn't just like a Listerine or a toothbrushing issue problem. This was a heavy green stench that came from a dead animal rotting in her stomach. And she always insisted on sitting right next to me and leaning over and pointing out all my misspelled words, all the words I mispronounced, all my stupid mistakes. And there was no escaping her nasty ass death breath. It was like bees that swarmed. There was no escaping it. It was astonishingly bad. And it was a privilege. My elementary school had a resource specialist, my public high school offered special ed classes, and my junior high offered learning skills classes. They caught my dyslexia at an early age in like the bad breath bees. They diagnosed, treated, swarmed, and medicalized my slow, broken brain. This retard had no choice but to adhere to the social economic standard. The educational system would be doing a disservice to the suburb if a bona fide retard slipped through the cracks. Dyslexia became the popular overdiagnosed disorder to help explain why healthy white middle-class kids could not live up to the educational standards set forth to cater to healthy middle-class white kids. I was a tragedy. A white middle-class tragedy, a retard. When I read the call for writers and performers for this project, Leaning Stories of Personal Relationships, I read the word leaning as the word learning. Now, the word leaning appears 21 times in the documents, and I'm not surprised that I misread the title word 21 times. I was a little frustrated, but I was not surprised. This type of stupid mistake was typical for me. After misreading the documents, and for a brief period of time before I realized my stupid mistake, I pondered this notion: what is learning in? What is this? What is learning in? Is it learning involved? Is it learning inclusive? Is it learning interpersonal? Is it learning incorporated? Is it learning in between? Is it learning embodied? This learning inquiry informed and positively impacted the way I understood leaning, the way I understood this project, like a wonderful queering. Although I hate my misreadings, and I do hate my misreadings, maybe they're not stupid mistakes after all, but possibilities. Possibilities for new meanings, for new connections, for new ways of seeing and listening and thinking and talking and processing, new ways of being, of valuing, of learning in. But just don't think I'm going to let you lean over and read my paper. That's it.
All right. So, I know it might not make a lot of sense why I put this all together, but I think if you go back and kind of review some of this is what makes decoloniality important to me, at least as a framework to kind of approach other issues. And I also put on the end here a whole bunch of quotes I pulled from Garcia and Baca's piece, if you want to dig into those. So, any questions?
All right, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off after you asked for questions, but you don't have to say questions. That's not a requirement.
Okay.
All right?